Simon Nemec reportedly wants out of New Jersey. Maybe. I don't know. My Slovak isn't very good.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, my name is JD Young, and today's episode of Locked On Sharks is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode, we're going to be looking at trades, specifically trade downs. We're going to look at teams to target if the Sharks decide they want to move off the 20th pick in an attempt to acquire more draft assets. And we're going to look at potentially moving down from the second pick and kind of what the Sharks could get back in draft capital. But first, we're going to start with one Simon Nemec, who may or may not wants to be traded. I don't know. It's a confusing situation. So, of course, the internet was all abuzz this morning or Thursday morning as a newspaper came out or an article came out. I don't know if it's a newspaper article or just whatever. An article came out, with an interview with Simon Nemec, who, of course, is from Slovakia. And we've had this issue before where translations can sometimes get a little mixed up, right? Where maybe he meant to say one thing, it gets translated a different way, and then all of a sudden what he meant to say was not actually what was said or whatever it was. But there was a report from the Slovakian newspaper, which I'm going to not really try to pronounce because, again, my Slovak is not great. But that he had basically asked to be traded, right? And this is with the Denik. We'll go with Denik, a newspaper where, he did a interview, and right, we see especially a lot of the European players. Pavel Regenda's been doing a ton of interviews over, in his home country as well. Like, of course, right, it's the off season, and we, here at Locked On Sharks get players on during the off season just to talk things over. But right, and was asked kind of about a situation, and he has said that he hadn't really met with the GM, and his agent really hadn't met with him. Of course, we do know Nemec is an RFA and looking for a big time extension, just kind of like how we saw with Luke Hughes not that long ago. And Nemec, the former second overall pick, really hasn't kind of done what you would expect from a second overall pick. But last season did have his kind of breakout year, right, where he had 11 goals. You saw the scoring production take a big jump. He has some big time kind of clutch moments for New Jersey. But there's we did the Nemec episode, it was a week ago or something like that, where there's still some red flags, when you kind of pop up the hood and look under and see, some of the analytics, and there's some red flags to his game as if he is, what type of player he's going to be. Is he going to continue to shoot at 10% shooting percentage, which doesn't seem realistic, especially for a defenseman. But right, he's still a 22-year-old player and we know, right, the Devils are really in a tough situation now when it comes to their cap. And you have guys like Dougie Hamilton, who has a big-time contract. You have a ton of defensemen who are already locked up, right? Luke Hughes kind of feels like he needs to kind of get some more runway here. And Nemec, who proved himself last year to kind of look like he's ready to take another big step, they've got some issues, right? They're poor Sonny Mehta, the new GM, kind of walking into a mess here as this team really hasn't been able to kind of take that big jump and big leap that a lot of people thought they would, especially with how good their core is and how those young core is now kind of aging into a mature core. It feels like they should really kind of start to take some big time steps here. So there was a report later on from This was from James Nichols, who does New Jersey Hockey Now. So shout out to the Hockey Now, our good friend Shang Peng, his colleague, who kind of came out and said, like, well, maybe not all of this is true, right? Because you look back to in February 2025 when there was reports that Nemec had asked for a trade then, and we did this whole song and dance then, including on this podcast about, so the Sharks traded for Simon Nemec, right? Right now, he reached out to, his people, of course. And, part of the report was, well, they hadn't talked to Meta or to New Devils GM Sonny Meta with his agent or with him. We're now, turns out James Nichols reports, well, they already have, or at least as of today, they had talked to him at some point there. So again, this might kind of just lead to, I don't want to say bad reporting. I don't want to disparage whoever, the Slovakian reporter here, but it just kind of feels like something's getting lost in translation between between Nemec, his camp, this reporter, and then kind of where the Devils are heading. I still think, again, we did this episode not that long ago, something's going to have to happen in New Jersey, especially if they want to kind of make a jump here, right? And Nemec is probably their best trade asset because, right, he's 22. He still has, kind of his whole big runway of what he's going to turn into. And he's cost controlled. And yes, he's, looking for a big time contract. But this is a cost controlled player who's a second overall pick in the draft in 2022. It wasn't that long ago. So, from the sound of it and from reports, the Devils are looking for a scoring winger. So everybody who's trying to already trade William Eklund over to the Devils for Nemec, that doesn't really kind of fit what they're looking for because, as we all know, Eklund and his scoring not really kind of where it needs to be, right? And there was reports or rumors, or I don't know if you want to say it, but there was rumors, we'll say, of that the Sharks had dangled Eklund for Nemec at the trade deadline this past season. And again, I don't know how far that went, if that was just a conversation or whatever, but clearly, right, that never happened. Or it clearly, if it was rumored, right, it clearly wasn't good enough for the Devils because William Eklund still plays for the San Jose Sharks and Simon Nemec plays for the New Jersey Devils. You do wonder, though, if kind of going into this offseason, again, if you're looking to, if the Devils want to try to find a scoring winger, and it's not like the Sharks have a lot of the, right, you can kind of look, right, Will Smith is not someone you're trading Simon Nemec for, right? That's not a fair trade. You could look at maybe a guy like Chernyshov, but the Canucks asked for Chernyshov recently, and the Sharks were like, thanks, but no thanks, as part of the Kiefer Sherwood deal. William Eklund, who I know this doesn't really feel like fits the bill. And, I think William Eklund is arguably the Sharks' second best play driver behind Macklin Celebrini. You do wonder if maybe Quentin Musty, who hasn't proven it at the NHL, but, right, you draft Quentin Musty looks to be a potential scorer. That's going to be what he is, right? Coming off a 20-goal season in the AHL this year, and looks to be a guy kind of ready to break through. He's cost controlled, right? This is his first year of his ELC. You have 2 more seasons of his ELC, and maybe it's something like Musty and the 20th pick in the draft, especially if you do it early enough, where then the Devils could turn around and maybe try to flip that 20th pick for something else in the scoring range. Especially a team, again, who is very cap strapped and needs to kind of look at cost control. that could be a route that you could potentially go there if you're Mike Grier and the New Jersey Devils. But I don't know. Like, it's going to be an interesting situation. If the Sharks do pursue Nemec, I would caution. I don't think he is the defensive savior. Well, potentially, I think Nemec can be a really good piece. I don't know if he can be your best defensive piece, if that makes a lot of sense. So I think he can, and maybe the Sharks just don't have a number one. Maybe they just have a lot of number twos and number threes, and you just kind of try to cobble things together defensively and just hope that your forwards can kind of figure things out for you, and your defense, you just kind of get enough production from them, and they're good enough defensively that you can kind of not need a number one. But I think those Nemec would give you, just another opportunity at an answer. I just don't think he would be the answer for the San Jose Sharks there if they do trade for him. But it fits the bill. It fits the bill of what the Sharks are looking for. So we're going to, though, talk about trading down from number 2 if the Sharks were to choose to do so. We're going to look at from, cap capital that they would potentially get from the Vancouver Canucks, from the Blackhawks, and from the New York Rangers. So we'll get to that in just 1 second. NBA playoffs are here and every possession matters. If you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel is a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets for just getting started. Great thing about FanDuel during the playoffs, they have everything you need right at your fingertips. You can check stats, trends, matchups before making your picks, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed. Whether you're looking at player props or just following your favorite stars, it adds another level of excitement to every game. Again, just pick Wemby to do cool Wemby things. You're probably going to have a good time. He's really fun to watch. So it's also really easy to navigate the app. It makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. So head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. I do, of course, want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. You can now get your Locked On Sharks fix completely ad-free by joining the Everyday Club today. Start your 7-day free trial right now. No, there's no codes, no nothing. Just go sign up, get closer to your team without the interruptions. Click the link in the show notes or head over to lockedonsharks.supercast to claim your free trial. All right. Trading down for 2, right? And as we're kind of going through this process, and I've been, doing a lot of research on all the players here, right? I wrote about the case for Ivar. I wrote about the case for Stenberg on my blog, The Reef, and I'm working on ones for the other players, right? Chase Reed, Keaton Verhoff, Carson Carroll's kind of like the 4 realistic options for the Sharks, I think, at number 2. And as we're going through this process, and I've been very vocal, I do think, I do think drafting the defenseman and passing on Stenberg. And as I'm going through it, though, maybe it's just me kind of thinking about it more and more. I'm starting to kind of come around on the just draft Stenberg and figure out the defense later, that side of the argument. But if the Sharks, again, we know there hasn't been a trade in the top, 20 or in the top 10 for 20 years, and there hasn't been a trade of a top 5 pick in even longer. But if the Sharks want to make some history and move down, to either, I think the 3 realistic options would be 3, 4, or 5. I don't want to, because again, you want to walk away if you're trading down. Right, you want to walk away with one of those defensemen that I just mentioned, right? Whether it's Verhoff, Carroll's, or Chase Reed. And if Stenberg's going to go 2, that leaves, no matter what, if you go to 3, 4, or 5, you're going to walk, like the math tells you, you're going to walk away with at least one of those defensemen, right? So wanted to look at kind of just the cost of moving down from each pick. So let's start with the Canucks, who are number 3, right? And we know we had just talked to our good friend Tony. The Canucks. We know the Canucks. We know a lot of teams want to try to move up to get Stenberg. So with the Canucks here, they're the Sharks' number 2 pick on this Perry pick value calculator that Puckpedia has. Perry pick Puckpedia. They have the number 2 pick worth 72.69 points, macaroons, whatever you want to, call it. What does it say points? But the drop off from number 2 to number 3 is 62. So the number 3 pick is 62.07. So that's a 10-point difference just from moving from pick 2 to pick 3. So it's a 10-point difference there. If you think about, and again, too, right, you have to entice Mike Greer to want to move down. So you're going to have to overpay, which is where we usually typically run into a problem here, where the Sharks would, right, they're going to have to they're going to be kind of blown away to take for this pick. If the Canucks wanted to, they could trade their pick. And they got the Quinn Hughes trade, number 24. That number 24 pick is worth 15.21 points. So combined, they'd be worth 77 points. And the Sharks' number 2 pick is, again, worth 72. We'll just say 73 points. So a little bit of overpay by the Canucks, but that is what you're typically getting there. Would be a number 24 type of pick there. So that's a moving down one spot and potentially walking away with 2 first-round picks. Not a bad haul there. The Canucks could also, because the Canucks do have their own, right? They do have the beginning of the second round, and they do have the Sharks' second-round pick there, which value-wise might be a little bit closer. But again, right, if you're San Jose, you want to be kind of blown away here. If you look at the Blackhawks, who kind of in similar, right, going down from pick 2 to 4. So pick 4 is worth 55 points. So it is a jump of, that is what, 15? I'm trying to do, or 17 points right there to move from pick 2 to pick 4. Draft-wise, that's worth the second pick in the second round, which the Chicago has, pick number 34, and then Toronto's pick that the Blackhawks got, which is pick number 37, and that's pretty even, 72.69 to 73.05. So you could move down 2 spots and pick up 2 second-round picks, which of course the Sharks they don't have anything kind of in that area after they traded their second-round pick for Kiefer Sherwood. They do have the Colorado second pick, which is going to be at the end of the second round. But right there, that's a pretty big gap right there. If you from number 20 all the way to, it's probably going to be 61, 62, somewhere in that range, with the what we expect from the Avs. So like if the Sharks wanted, and this doesn't include, players, because it's hard to, what is a Kevin Kurchinski? What is a Del Mastro? Like what is one of those guys kind of worth if the Sharks were to try to trade? And right, I think that would be kind of what, especially with the Blackhawks, right, who do have a glut of defensemen, I would say, in their system right now. And, guys like White Kaiser, you're not right. That's not going to happen. Right. And Alex Vlasic, I think that is a future, that is a kind of building block piece for them. But, maybe a guy like Ethan Del Mastro is a left-handed defenseman. He just finished up his ELC. Guy who's, put up decent points, a former 4th-round pick. Maybe, you have Kevin Krasinski as a former top 10 pick, really kind of has gotten passed up in his so far. You have a guy like Sam Renzel, which I think would be you would be I don't think that one's happening either. A guy who played, he had 14 points with the Blackhawks in 54 games, who again looks like a guy who might be late 1st-round pick from the 2022 draft. Like maybe not. It's hard to kind of value, try to kind of put a value on which of those guys, because they just have so many of these guys who are all kind of either drafted around the same area or kind of right around the same part of the development. Maybe it's just kind of you're just say okay, Kaiser's not available and Vlasic's not available, and maybe it is Renzel's not available or whatever it is, but if just pick one and you can have one of those guys. But yeah. Then there's the Rangers. So the Rangers, of course, have the 5th pick, and going from pick 2 to pick 5 is a drop in 50, so it goes from 73 points to 50 points. So that's a 23-point value. You could ask for don't have a lot of picks, so you can maybe ask for next year's first, but I don't think the Rangers would want to do that, because that pick's probably going to be somewhere in the early teens, most likely, right? Yes, the Rangers are really bad this year, and maybe they continue to be really bad again next year, but maybe it's like a top 10 protected or something like that. But I don't think the Rangers would want to do that. So I think the Rangers would be very much in the business of, well, let's just trade a roster player. But of course, there's the Adam Fox discussion, but I don't think Braden Schneider is worth 23 points is equivalent of the 16th, 17th pick in the draft. Braden Schneider is not worth that. I'm not trading Braden for Braden. I'm not type of thing, right? And again, they don't really have a lot of guys where you kind of, especially defensively, where you kind of look at and you're other than Adam Fox, where you're okay, I want that guy. And Adam Fox would be very much a he wants to be traded type of player. So those are the 3. I think realistically the one that makes the most sense would be the Blackhawks, because they have the most stuff, right, between picks and players who could help the Sharks this year. That one I think makes the most sense. And even then, especially if Vancouver picks Malhotra at number 3, you could still walk away with the top defenseman in the draft class, if that's what you chose to do, if you're Mike Greer. So I think the interesting one is trading down from 20. So let's discuss that here in just 1 second. If you got a sweet tooth like I do, you know how tough it is to find that perfect treat without all the sugar. That's why the Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shot brings that nostalgic flavor back in a whole new way. Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots treat your taste buds to an explosion of fruity flavor with a tasty caffeine kick. It's a quick, easy way to satisfy that sweet craving while keeping things simple and on the go. It's a zero sugar treat that's sweet tooth approved. Also, it's super convenient. Small shot that you can throw in your bag. That way you've got it when you're out on the run. Nice little pick-me-up right around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You know what I'm talking about. So get candy-flavored chaos with Fruity Rainbow 5-Hour Energy Shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. All right, so the 20th pick, which is the pick that the Sharks got in the Jake Wallman trade from the Edmonton Oilers. And I still believe that this is going to be the pick that gets traded for NHL help right now, right? And whether that's Simon Nemec, whether that's a guy like Bowen Byram, whatever it is, right? I think that is the pick that gets traded. But if the Sharks don't trade it, and maybe the board doesn't fall the way you want it to. Moving back might not be the worst thing to do to help kind of restock some of your prospects here. And I know the Sharks prospect pool is kind of brimming at this point with all the players in it. And yeah, some of them have started to graduate and stuff, but like there's still like a ton of guys. Like there's still a ton of guys kind of coming here. So and whether they're future trade pieces or just organizational depth, like adding more kind of swings at it like isn't the worst idea in the world, right? And smart teams trade back a lot. Calgary's like does a really good job of trading back and has done. Like the Hurricanes trade back a bunch and get more swings at it, right? So a couple of teams to potentially target in that area. So you have a team we just talked about, the Chicago Blackhawks, where if you wanted to trade 20, and the Blackhawks for a team who kind of like the Sharks has a ton of assets, right? Ton of picks, ton of prospects. Maybe if they wanted to consolidate, you could get that pick 34 and those pick 37 and maybe even something else like a late round pick, or maybe it's a late round pick swap, but you could walk away with that, the second pick in the second round and the fifth pick, or there was a fourth or fifth pick in the second round, by just moving back here and trading out of the first round. And, I know like kind of talking to people like that pick 20 is kind of where you feel like things fall off a little bit in the draft. Again, if the board doesn't break your way, and especially if you're looking for a defenseman, like that might not be a bad trade back target, would be the Blackhawks, because again, they have so much stuff when it comes to draft capital that they might want to try to consolidate and get back into the first round to try to grab somebody there. So I think the Blackhawks make a ton of sense. I think I've mentioned them before, but I think they make a ton of sense to trade back from that 20th pick. And you could get a nice, decent haul of two very high second round picks to move back, right? You move back 14 spots there and gives you two whacks at the apple at guys that you probably are going to have graded pretty closely there. So another team who I just talked about does kind of trade back a lot, but kind of in a similar situation where they've got a lot of picks, would be the Calgary Flames. So you could move back, theoretically. You probably have to send something back their way, whether it's like a fourth round pick or something like that, but you could move from pick 20 to pick 28. So you move back 8 spots, and then you pick up a second round pick at pick number 36, right? And again, right now we're just trying to kind of look at just getting some more swings and trying to kind of find some pieces there for you. So a team like Calgary, who does have, like, they've been kind of in that try to get as many assets as possible. They have they have 4 second round picks in this year's draft. So they're a prime candidate of a trade, try to kind of bring, kind of consolidate some of those picks, get back in the first round, especially for a team who already has 2 second round picks. Maybe they are let's move up and try to kind of get a player, especially again, if the draft kind of ends at 20 or like there's a big fall off after 20. And again, if the board doesn't break the way you like, I think Calgary would be a team that you could definitely try to kind of work out a deal with there. So, and then finally, the other team that I think that you definitely want to kind of keep an eye on here, team we just talked about as well, would be the Vancouver Canucks, where you could move from pick 20 to 24. So you move back 4 spots. And then you can pick up a third round pick, which the Sharks do not have a third round pick. And maybe there might be something else in there that the Canucks throw in there as well for you. But that could be another potential move. Or again, you just move back a couple spots and you're getting a third round pick for your services of moving back a couple spots. And the Canucks, have a fair amount of second round picks here, like we just discussed, right? They have their pick. They have, of course, the Sharks second round pick. But if you do the second round pick, you're probably going to have to send something else back. So I think for San Jose, just getting another swing, especially in the third round, maybe it's one of those. Then you could potentially move up in the second round if you wanted to, because you'd have the Avalanche pick and then that pick. And if somebody you liked started to maybe fall in the second round, then you could use that ammo to move kind of back up the board here. So I think for the Sharks, right, where you don't really have as many picks as you've had in previous years, that 20th pick moving back from that 20th pick would be a great way to kind of restock and kind of produce some picks out of thin air. And especially, again, if the board doesn't kind of fall the way you want, and maybe there's a defenseman you like there at 20, or there's a couple that you like there at 20, or whoever you like, right? You have a couple targets at 20 and maybe they get picked right ahead or something like that. I think going back a couple steps and trying to kind of just get some more assets, not the worst thing in the world there. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back next week as we'll have more draft profiles. We got plenty of other free agent profiles as well coming up. So make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until next week, bye, friends.